incredibly close at Imola in qualifying. The top 3 runners basically the same lap time, the next 2 basically the same lap time as it was for the next 3. And get this, in Q2, the 2 Ferrari drivers, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, separated by only 0.3, and yet that was enough for Charles to be 3rd quickest in Q2 and thus easily to go through into Q3. And for Carlos not to make it, he was knocked out in Q2. It's only P11th. The difference is absolutely minute on this day at Imola. But that's what makes for a great qualifying, and that's what makes for great driving as well. And Lewis Hamilton took the pole in a Mercedes that arguably was not the quickest car on the day. That honour went to Red Bull Honda, who qualified 2nd and 3rd, but Lewis just maximised everything. His ability for high-speed braking, when to come out of the brake pedal pressure, how to apply the power, how to sit with the car on acceleration, how to get the maximum from the car in a straight line as soon as possible, and make no errors on a circuit that was very, very tight by Formula One standards. We're talking almost Monaco here. Yesterday we had track limits imposed on the exit of turn 9, that left-hander at the top of the hill, where in the past not too much has happened at Imola. Today they added to that the curbs at the Variante Alta, the top chicane, which meant that none of that curb hopping could take place. You could curb hop going in, but not in the middle, and then coming out you could use exit curb. But that hurt a lot of drivers, particularly Yuki Tsunoda, who went off in Q1. Let's just talk a little bit about Yuki, because yesterday I said that he was looking really good, and to my eye he looked to be right up there in Lando Norris territory. But today we saw an additional dimension to Yuki, and this was the one we got a taste of in Bahrain when he was a bit irritated in traffic on a Friday, and there was a expletive deleted in his radio transmission there, and he said after the Bahrain weekend, yeah, I need to quieten down a bit, I need to keep my emotions under control in traffic. Well, it doesn't appear as if he's done a very good job of doing that, or indeed if the management at AlphaTauri have done a very good job of getting on top of that, because this morning, obviously he felt quick, obviously the car was good. He first of all started having a rant at Sergio Perez. Well, you know, maybe Sergio did get in the way, and don't forget there was that incident yesterday between Esteban Ocon, who was going slowly, and Sergio Perez, who hit him on that quick corner. But putting that to one side, he is Sergio Perez and he is Yuki Tsunoda, so getting on the radio and complaining about Sergio wasn't really clever. And then later on he was saying, it's a traffic paradise, what's going on here? I think that's his way of saying this is just a traffic dominated weekend, and he was showing his frustration. Well, I think because of that, and because of the feeling of going into qualifying, knowing the lap time that he should have done and was capable of doing, and he was probably thinking top 5 or 6, I don't know, he went off on his first quick lap in Q1. He'd looked pretty good through the first sector, but then got to that Variante chicane, couldn't use the curbs, got sideways, hit the tyre wall, and that was it. That, of course, brought Q1 to a temporary halt. So this was a massive learning weekend for Tsunoda, this driver of enormous talent from Japan. It'll be interesting, I think, to see how AlphaTauri handle that, whether they just try to be very disciplined with him, or whether they try to get him to understand that there is another way of handling traffic, and that is, dare I say it, the Lewis Hamilton way, who looked calm and serene with all this stuff going on around him and how close it was at Imola. He looked absolutely superb in the Mercedes, I thought, in every dimension of his driving, as I've said at the beginning of the video. Mercedes, I think, would acknowledge that they are not the quickest car right now, and we've done a big explanation of that with Craig Scarborough, and I encourage you to watch that video, of course, because it does explain why at the moment Red Bull appear to have more downforce for the same given drag level, to put it relatively simply. But Lewis maximised every department and did the job just perfectly. It was quite amusing, I thought, to see Max this morning timing his last lap in FP3 to be able to come round as the checkered flag came out and thus be in the pole position to do a practice start from pole position. That's showing how confident he was, even though he didn't do many laps yesterday. He didn't do that many laps in the morning either. It was like 25 minutes before he was out really going for a run of any sort this morning, which was a bit strange. So Max hasn't got that much mileage on him. And then he did say after qualifying, when he got beaten by Sergio Perez and of course Lewis, but they'd basically done all the same lap time, he said it was a very messy Q3 for him. And indeed it was. This is a circuit that I was watching an onboard with Sergio Perez and thinking, this was in the morning, and thinking how nice a track this is for a driver like Perez, who's so good at putting on the power. We've talked about this before, that exactly the right linear rate relative to the load on the loaded rear. In other words, if he's going through a left-hander, he doesn't put any more throttle on the car than the right rear can take at any given moment. That is his calling card, a bit like Jenson Button. We've talked about this in the past. That isn't one of Max Verstappen's standout qualities. He's more about general car control. And we saw that with a graphic on Saturday morning, which was, I think it's a Rob Smedley developed graphic since he's been at Liberty. It's a pretty good one. It shows going into effectively the first chicane. They go through that Tamburello kink, that's turn 1, but turn 2 they call it, but let's call it the first chicane, braking from high speed. Both Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas braking from virtually the same speed, but Valtteri braking later and taking more speed out of the car. Max braking sooner, but not taking as much out of the car. So he's going into the first chicane with more speed. And he's just basically from there on just relying on reflexes and balance to get the car through. And I think this is the first time we've had a real glimpse, snapshot of the way Max Verstappen drives. He's not the latest braker in the world, despite what I'm sure what a lot of fans out there would imagine with Max. Incredibly late breaker, but he's not. He's not a great late breaker, and he does come out of the power in a nice way. What we don't know is how he comes out of the brakes. I suspect he's really, really good in the way he comes out of the brake pedal pressure, and that's probably one of his great qualities. But anyway, around Imola, getting back to the point, what Max is very good at doing there isn't actually particularly rewarding for the lap. What Imola is all about is the exits, and the way you get the exits absolutely right. And that's what Sergio Perez is all about. That is what he is as a racing driver. He's an exit from the corner racing driver. He's a lot better as a result of all his work at Force India Racing Point with guys like Tom McCullough, got to be said, with the front end now. And we saw that in the wet in Turkey last year. And of course, he's a better driver now than he was 3 years ago. Not too many top level drivers about which you can actually say that. But Sergio today, absolutely superb. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but Lewis Hamilton on the pole, just a perfect lap, maximizing all the compromises that he's had to deal with that car over the weekend. And Mercedes, of course, as Scarb said in his video, are for sure going to make up that gap to Red Bull over the next few races, in terms of the rake of the car, of course. But for Sergio Perez, it was a really, really good qualifying session. I think Red Bull did a really good thing too, to keep him on the red tyre throughout. So there wasn't that business of having to run the medium in Q2 and then go back to the soft tyre. This was a chance for Sergio just to get the feel of the car and to get that lap in. And he did it really, really well. Max, of course, was on the medium. So that means that the two Mercedes and Max Verstappen will be starting on the medium tyre. Lewis Hamilton and Max, basically, because Valtteri Bottas did not have a good qualifying session yet again. So Max will be thinking, well, I'm on P3, but he will not like the fact that he's been out-qualified by Sergio Perez in race 2. This is not a good thing for a driver like Max Verstappen. But I think, obviously for Sergio, obviously for Formula One, it's a really good thing. And to see two Red Bulls there behind Lewis is just great. It's going to be a wonderful Grand Prix tomorrow, particularly as the tyre strategy between the two Red Bulls, of course, is different.